And ready to go. So I'm sitting here at Progress Place, which you see a picture of in front of you on this screen, with our Progress Place Clubhouse Connections team. And we're really excited to talk about the project we've been working on. If you could have the next slide. Whoops, there we go. So this is a picture of our team down in our young adult room where we were meeting. And so our executive sponsor was our ED, Chris Havel-Brozak, who was really excited and so supportive of this project and helped us along the way. I was the team lead, and I'm the clubhouse manager here. And our process owners were our intake workers, Kevin Nakata, Karen Cushing, and then we added Ali McGrath because Karen, who has now left our team because we're waiting momentarily, is about to have a baby. So we were prepared and we're able to carry on the work with Ali's help. The team members for Progress Place is made up of 3 large units. We're made up of staff members and actual participants, members of the program, which worked out extremely well for us. If I could have the next slide. So for all of you, I'm not sure you know about Progress Place, but we're a community mental health program located in the downtown core of the city of Toronto. The Clubhouse program has 800 active members, and on average, we get 150 to 160 members attending the program daily. That's working with a frontline staff group of 19 full-time staff. Last year, we had 342 members were accepted to Progress Place. And the problem that we wanted to look at from the beginning is we wanted to review and improve our orientation process to ensure we were doing all we could to help the new members integrate into the Clubhouse community. Next slide, please. So we developed, with the help of Abella and Nicole, our problem statement, which was, since 2015, approximately 1/3 of the new members of Progress Place drop out of the program before reaching their recovery goals. By new members not completely connecting, they do not fully achieve their goals, which has a negatively impacts on their quality of life. So as you can see, moving over to our aim statement, we ended up coming up with, by December 2019, 10% more new members will be able to have the opportunity to achieve the recovery goals by connecting with the Clubhouse program by attending 11 times or more in the first 6 months of the period. Next slide, please. So we ended up deciding that this would be sort of our diagnostic journey, that we would do an intake and orientation process mapping, do the fishbone diagram, and the Pareto chart. So my colleague Kevin is going to take over at this point.
Sure. Thanks, Robin. And if we could move to the next slide, which would be our process maps, part 1 and 2. Perfect. Thank you. Thanks, guys. My name is Kevin. I've been part of Progress Place for a number of years, trying to assist with the intake and orientation of our newest members. I'm a process owner, and we are about to give birth to this E-QIP process. So thank you for your patience. The review of intake and orientation is a very lengthy procedure, as you can see. We have broken this procedure down to a number of general topics, as you can see. The beginning phase, or at least the contemplative phase, the actual intake process, and on the next map, I'll just mention it now, but even though you don't have to go there, it will be the orientation and the actual connection to the Clubhouse community. So as intake person and the process of deriving all of the factors to include membership from a new perspective, there's an incredible number of details, as I found out. Despite being at the Clubhouse for a number of years, to have the perspectives of my colleagues, let alone from the international level of colleagues, this model of Clubhouse, to digress briefly, is always reviewed. And in the clubhouse model, whether it's our tours, whether it's our intake and orientation, just by virtue of being a training center, it causes us, and we are required to reflect on the number of our processes on an international level with respect to the club model. In any event, back to the process map. As you can see, just within the contemplative and intake phases, there's a number of factors that my colleagues and I have pinpointed out. And as an example, not only in the process of change, but in the process of welcoming new members. As one example, when we look at the tour phase, for example, the number of details and the facts that we try to impart with a newer member in a very quick half an hour, we're finding, despite not being part of our change ideas, there's a number of things that we looked at, including tours. So we're always reviewing tours as a process in itself. The orientation as well is also an area that we are always reviewing. So my colleagues are going to next talk a little bit about how we've distilled that to some of the workable changes. I guess in terms of this process and finding, if you were to have joined us in our boardroom, and I guess the mural paper, the number of stickies, we actually had to remind ourselves to stop that process and to be a little bit more concrete, and like others have mentioned already, to trying to avoid creating solutions as we try to think of different ways to break down the intake and orientation of membership. So it was a concert effort to remind ourselves not to offer all the many solutions. What else to share with you? I guess if we can go to the next slide, I guess, the part 2. Thank you. So within that section, in orientation and the clubhouse process, again, other ideas. I'm not going to read the bottom section of the number of ideas that we've come up with, but another sampling was at our reception area and looking at how members were welcomed into the clubhouse physically at a reception area. So that was something that we were also scrutinizing. But I'm going to leave my colleagues to get a lot more specific in terms of the process and how we arrived at coming into some workable solutions without trying to reinvent the club wheel. So my colleague Andrew will be next.
Hey, this is Andrew, and I have Christine with me. I'm a supervisor on the first floor unit here at Progress Place, and Christine is a member on the cafe unit. You can actually leave it on this slide because I just wanted to mention how I think the whole team found it really useful to really look at the process of intake and the process of orientation and you know, break down the processes and look at how many moving parts there were, because I think it kind of illuminated for us, you know, all the potential for difficulties and potential for problems. And then also with this slide, I think it's important to note that, you know, with the previous slide, there was the tours and the lead up, but it's really at the beginning of this slide is where we're looking at the defining the problem and defining new members at the point of intake for our problem statement. You can go to the next slide. So this is our fishbone diagram. So I really wanted to thank the E-QIP team for helping us out with this because there was a lot of causes that we had come up with for new members not being able to, you know, work on their recovery. So our E-QIP team came up with quite a bit. You know, there's the different headings there. Problems that were relevant or causes that were relevant to members, underneath the staff, underneath procedures, and underneath the place itself, and within our policies. So you can go to the next slide. So we ourselves came up with all these causes, and from here, in consultation with the E-QIP team, you know, we set out to define, or I guess to hone in on 3 that each member of the team thought were the most relevant. From there, we explored that with the rest of the clubhouse community, the rest of the organization, staff and members, to look at all of those causes and for them to say what they thought were the most relevant as well. I'm going to pass it on to Christine because she has a perspective as a member, and I think it is important for us to note that, you know, we were going to everybody in this, you know, members and staff alike. So Christine's going to give her member perspective.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Christine. We're in Progress Place. We're approximately. We thought I would be a good fit for this group because I'm a relatively new member. I can bring that new member insight. For me, there were causes that came up. One was travel distance, me living in Scarborough. Another was the stigma of even just walking through the front door. And the last was the lack of structure and standardized orientation in becoming a member.
Yeah, thanks, Christine. So the last point that Christine mentioned, the lack of a standardized orientation process, as you can see, they're not highlighted, but there's two causes that have 14 total marks on them. So one was the lack of a standardized orientation process, and the other was the limited opportunities for consistent one-on-one time with new members. I think it's also important to see we have the Progress Place E-QIP team and the Progress Place member and staff. So that was done in focus groups, and it's important, I think, to see that those were very consistent across the board between both our group and the rest of the clubhouse, the rest of Progress Place. The other thing that I wanted to also note was there's a couple other causes that had high rates, so such as life circumstances and unclear program expectations, and that in a lot of ways those related to these two core issues, life circumstances, people not coming in, but you know, as part of the orientation process, making sure we are outreaching. And the same thing with unclear program expectations. When people are being given tours, for example, which is part of that orientation process, that they're being given the correct information and that their expectations are in line with what we are offering. So you can go to the next chart. So again, this is just highlighting those same numbers. Yeah, we can go to the next chart. The Pareto chart, same thing. The two big ones being, again, lack of standardized orientation process and lack of one-on-one time. Yeah, next slide. So here we have our charter with our problem statement and aim statement. So if you go to down to the root causes of problems where we listed that, the one-on-one time with new members and lack of standardized orientation process, did want to mention we did look at transportation costs as being another root cause. We could look at that, again, in consultation with the E-QIP coaches. We felt and they felt as well that the first two were kind of big enough to tackle, that we would only focus our time on those two. But ongoing, we are looking at this, the transportation costs as well, and what we can do to, you know, make sure members who live at a far distance can be able to come to Progress Place. So yeah, next slide. So now we're looking at a bit of the data. So what we have here, this is year of 2017, and it's the percentage of new members, which again is defined as acceptance into our program, and the amount, or the percentage of new members who attended 11 plus times by the month that they started. So 11 plus times was used to define the ability to work on their recovery goals. Less than that, we kind of thought to ourselves, you know, maybe that's not enough time to work on that. So they would, for this here, if you're looking at it, overall throughout the year, 33% of the members who were accepted out of, I believe Robin said 342, 33% of them were able to attend more than 11 times and therefore reach their recovery goals, which again goes back to our problem statement, and it's a number we want to improve by 10%. So I'll pass it on to my colleague Appy. And for the next slide.
Awesome. Thank you, Andrew. My name is Appy. I'm staff on the first floor. I'm just going to quickly go over the driver diagram. So as we were doing the process map, we came up with lots of great ideas, which we noted down, but we didn't really know how they all connected until we actually wrote everything down in this driver diagram. So I'm just going to go do a quick reminder. So our goal is to ensure that more new members connect with the Clubhouse program by attending 11 or more times in their first 6 months. And our two primary drivers, which will kind of help allow this to happen, is to allow for more consistent opportunities for one-on-one time with new members, and also to standardize our orientation process. So as mentioned, we had lots of wonderful change ideas, so I'm just going to quickly go over some of them. So one of them was to digitize our intake interview, and our second change idea was to reintroduce our Clubhouse conversation, which will ensure that there will be more one-on-one time with new members. To ensure one-on-one time with new members is prioritized. So both these change ideas kind of link to the secondary driver, which will allow to free up staff time so they can support new members. The third change idea that we came up with was to create a system for member orientation buddies. And the secondary driver for that would be to involve our current members to support our new members. All these three change ideas would link back to our first primary driver of ensuring consistent opportunity time for one-on-one time with new members. The next change idea that we felt was important was to have staff assigned daily in each unit to be responsible to welcome and orientate new members. Another change idea was to develop orientation tools and procedures to also debrief with new members after their first day to see how their first day was, and to outreach new members if they have not returned. The next change idea was to reorganize our front reception area to create a more welcoming area for new members. All these three change ideas will kind of connect together in a secondary driver to focus on best practices for welcoming new members and to create a better orientation. Our last change idea that we had was to create a new member board with new member name and an expected start date. What this will create is it will kind of give members and staff, allow them to be able to identify and welcome new members when they first start. If you can go to the next slide, please. So we have 7 wonderful change ideas, but we haven't started all of them. So we have started 2, which my 2 colleagues will kind of go into more of a description of one of the cycles that we have started. If you can go to the next slide, please.
Hi everyone, this is Allie McGrath. I'm an intake worker here at Progress Place. So as you can see, we have 7 change ideas, and we're currently in the testing phase of 2 of those change ideas. If you could go to the next slide. Thank you. So for our change idea, we wanted to highlight the findings from our testing cycles as we prepare for our first implementation of digitizing the intake process. And to go through this, I'd like to welcome my colleague Judith. Judith, you want to introduce yourself?
I'm Judith. I'm a member on clerical.
Okay. Yeah, you're first.
As identified in the fishbone diagram, it was reported that there are limited opportunities for consistent one-on-one time with staff to help new members to connect.
So during our process mapping, we determined that intake workers are usually the first point of staff face-to-face contact, and they really act as a bridge in engaging the new members in the program.
It was noted that on average, it took 2 hours and 15 minutes for intake, including initial interview, followed by data entry and follow-up.
Thanks. So the intention behind digitizing the intake process, which would be the interview plus data entry simultaneously, is really to alleviate staff-only workload that can create more face-to-face time with new members, but not for the intake workers to increase the number of intakes, as our wait time is already very low.
Concerns were identified about the impact on quality of member experience. Would the initial use of technology negatively affect the member-staff relationship?
So our testing cycles included potential members who had completed the intake before the digitization, and who also took part in the new system for comparison, and one intake worker. So our assumption was that it would decrease the overall intake time. Testing reported that the process had actually increased the interview time initially due to lack of familiarity with the new system. Also through the testing cycles, it was determined that the system needed to be optimized by using laptops instead of desktop computers to improve member staff comfort. And then during the rest of our testing, we identified that there was ultimately a reduction in the total intake process time. Next slide, please. So we're going to now go through our data collection. So Judith, do you want to discuss the process measures?
The process measures we tracked a decrease in average intake length once a level of comfort is reached by intake with a new system.
And for the outcome measures, by digitizing 100% of intake interviews, there will be an increase in intake staff workers one-on-one time to help new members connect.
And the balancing measure, member feedback was incorporated during the testing process, and current members received a digitized intake and were asked for feedback.
So now we're going to hand it back to Robin.
Hi, sorry, we're having to move around a little bit here. So our team was really committed and excited to work on the E-QIP project. It really sort of lit a flame within our clubhouse. But even though we were really, oh, can I have the next slide, please? Even though our agency made Clubhouse Connections a real priority, it was still really challenging for us to find enough time to work on the project, given the daily demands of operating the clubhouse. So it ended up being spread over several weeks. Next slide, please. So, oh, did we go ahead 2 slides? Yes, let me see. Yeah, here we are. We're excited because the lessons we learned is that we are now able to identify possible solutions so that we can better support new member integration in our Clubhouse program. Participating in the training, it's helped us look at other systems and processes within the organization with a whole different lens. It's given us a more methodical approach to improve our program. In the past, people would often think up a solution, and we would get so excited about the solution that we would implement prior to us testing the data out. So this has really slowed us down and allowed us to take that time to look at the data, because we actually collect a huge amount of data connected to the Clubhouse program. We just often haven't taken the time to analyze and slow down in that process. So for us, this has been just amazing. We chose, in terms of our group, to have a 9-person E-QIP team because we wanted it to represent the wide range of perspectives of the members and staff from all parts of the program. Although having such a large team has somewhat slowed the pace of our project, we believe the unique insights each team member contributed made it really worthwhile. Having members of Progress Place involved in every step of our project has enriched the process and will, I believe, really have a major impact in strengthening the sustainability of our outcomes ultimately, because of it being really rooted in the grassroots. And to take a moment to talk about that, one of the things that, in looking back and involving the members of the program, we chose that we had 3 members of the program, 1 from each unit, working in a partnership with the staff. And we thought that in reflection that was really important, because I think the members, coming from a member who had been part of the program for a long period of time versus a newer member, those different perspectives were just so interesting and rich in the different outlook. And on top of it, I think the members ended up working as a support group for each other as they came and attended the trainings with us. You know, often people would say things like, oh, this is just so confusing. And we would all, as a team, say, well, we're all learning new things, and it's confusing for all of us. Also, I think having multiple consumer survivors or members on the team, the other value is there was room for people to step off the team and go away and pursue the important goals of their recovery when that was necessary, and then to come back on again. Also, there were a couple moments where, you know, we were sitting around the table and the staff were really worrying about making assumptions of, like, computers and would it be intimidating to people. And I remember this wonderful moment when we turned to Christine and said, Christine, do you think this would be intimidating? What did you think when you came to Progress Place? And, you know, can you imagine someone being at a computer? And Christine said, oh, not at all. I just thought Progress Place was really behind the times and not having a computer in the first place. And I really believe if Christine hadn't been there with that voice, we would have, as staff, got all hung up in this concept, and we were able to smoothly move beyond that as a potential barrier. Next slide, please. If we were going to redo the project, I think we would narrow the scope of the topic. Andrew had talked about that originally we had 3 root causes, but even the 2 we had, you know, as you can see the complexity of our process mapping, we chose a really broad subject, and it generated a wide range of change ideas, which is taking us time. We believe the end result is going to be really beneficial when we've done, but it was a pretty complex topic to pick for our very first E-QIP project. All the members of Progress Place and staff have now received E-QIP training through the Ideas project, and we now share a common framework which we can apply to resolving problems and to implementing changes in our organization. We're all really excited and hopeful that now we have these tools and methods, we'll be able to strengthen the quality of our programs in the future. We also have a board member who is a real cheerleader behind our project, and she has a real interest and background in E-QIP, which has been a tremendous resource to us. Next slide, please. And so our next steps will be to completing our testing for all our change ideas and starting the process to implement all the changes. Once this is completed, we will start to consider what our next E-QIP project will be, what we'll take on, and maybe that will be some of the root causes we identified before in our diagnostic journey. Next Monday morning, we will be making probably this very similar to this presentation about our project to all the members and staff of the clubhouse. We believe that the entire Progress Place community will benefit from the learning we've gained as part of this project. And honestly, we can't thank you enough for all the help and support that the E-QIP team has given us. And we really believe that it's going to really help us move forward in a really positive and productive way in the future. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Robin. One of the things that was very heartening to see is when you were going through your root causes, the equal value of the E-QIP team and the members and the team when you were rating those root causes and then coming up with a common score. So it sounds like that was a very valuable exercise, and some things were slightly different or rated a little bit differently, but it's nice to see that equal value is given to both. Where are you at with the intake process? Can you speak a little bit more about, you talked about 2 hours, 15 minutes, and is it taking less time to do the computer-based at this point?
We've, so far in the testing, we think we've dropped off by about 30 minutes, at this point, but we're anticipating that's going to drop even further. So we are just arranging to get the laptops, and then we believe we're now ready to implement the change. So we're quite excited about that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, thank you. Let's see if there's any questions here just before we go on to St.